Welcome to the Gain Momentum podcast, focusing on timeless lessons from senior leaders in hospitality, travel, food service, and technology. I'm joined today by two fellow Gain advisors, Silvio Reale from Bangkok, Thailand, and Brendon Granger from Sydney, Australia. How are you doing?
G'day, Adam. How are you?
Doing
I'm
great.
doing great. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, good evening, whichever time zone it is, right? We're all making it happen.
That's it. Do it at Gain.
This is the whole nature with hospitality, is that it really is 24 hours. And we can talk about sleep issues later on down the line, but here we're supposed to talk about the technological nuances of APAC in your respective areas, Australia and Southeast Asia. So let's start with a little bit on your backgrounds in hospitality and hospitality technology. Silvio, if you want to start things off.
Yeah, sure. It's great to be here. I stepped into this region some 30 years ago. So I've been in Asia a long time, and I like to say I'm more Asian now than I'm more Australian Italian. But I fell in love, I guess, with hospitality in the 2000 period, in early 2000. Prior to that, I worked with the big multinationals like Honeywell and Siemens, always in the automation space. And I just kind of touched hospitality in the sense of providing a thermostat to a hotel. And then I guess that's where I started to realize that a thermostat was not going to cut it. But being in Asia, I have the luxury of this really this personal experience. And I came from the industrial space where you would walk around with a hard hat and all sorts of goggles, and you were worried when something fell onto you, to walking into a 5-star, Four Seasons hotel. It was much more pleasant to have meetings in a resort in Bali than it was on a chemical plant in Gladstone, for example. That's how I got into hospitality, moving from automation into hotels in the early 2000s, and that's where I am now.
Interesting transition. Brendon.
Adam, I went straight into hospitality after school. I loved business at school, but didn't want to be an accountant. And at the time, I didn't know what drew me to hospitality, but hospitality degree, operations, feasibility consulting, that led me into IT, working for a number of different vendors. And it wasn't until probably 10 years ago, going through some documentation, my grandparents had always owned restaurants, but I found my grandfather's passport and he described himself as a hotelier. So he owned a hotel in Paris for many years, but in Australia, I only ever knew him as a restaurateur. But that's my background.
Awesome. Hospitality is a bit of a calling, as you would say.
Yeah, I think second generation. It skipped a generation.
Skipped one. Well, sometimes it does, right? I mean, same thing with doctors and lawyers. Sometimes it skips a generation.
I should add to that, coming from an Italian family, I think I grew up with hospitality. Brendon, when you just mentioned that, I thought I grew up with always having lots of people at the house. My mum, who, she's 85, she's still fit and healthy. She was the master of hospitality, always people at our house. And I guess somehow that gave me the grounding or the background to do what I'm doing now. Really enjoying being in that industry.
Cool. Well, I'm wondering, to segue to hospitality technology, I'm wondering if you could first unpack, through the lens of one hotel you like in your respective region, what makes that hotel unique for its region, and maybe a little bit on the culture of your region and how that's expressed through that hotel. Silvio, do you have any opening thoughts there for a hotel in Bangkok or in Thailand or in Southeast Asia in general?
Well, look, there really are a lot. So, two that that stand out, and I'd like to say here in Bangkok, and I'm maybe a little biased because I'm here, but, the Siam at Siam is a fantastic hotel. It's a small boutique resort. It's right on the Chao Phraya River. It's very private. In itself, it's a museum of Thai art and Thai architecture, and the service is very unique. You can arrive by boat, you can arrive by car. But what really distinguishes it is that personal touch, and everything is taken into account. And I know the team there quite well, and I work with them quite often. So that's one property, and from there I can say the Chatrium Group, who can give you everything from wellness and luxury and city living in their property. But one thing that they don't compromise again is that personal touch, that welcome. So you talk to the owner, and they call themselves Chatrium Grand because they want that experience to be grand, and that's what's very unique about the hospitality, the hotels in Asia, more so because we can have a high guest to staff ratio or staff to guest ratio. That's why you can get that personal touch. But it's also in Thailand as part of the culture here. Again, being biased, I think the Thais themselves have this natural warmth and welcome. It does sort of walk. It is similar in the Philippines, in Vietnam, and Singapore. But in Thailand, I think it's very unique. And so those 2 points and those 2 hotels, I think, really stand out. There are many others, of course, in a similar fashion.
Brendon, any in Australia or New Zealand?
Yeah, Adam, the hotel and hotel group that I point to, it's the QT in Sydney. I think we've talked about it before. It's part of the Ridges event, um, which dates back to the 1900s. Like, they run cinema groups here. But what's unique about the QT Sydney is it's irreverent, it's cheeky, it's laid back, it's cool. You know, there is a use of technology when you get in the lift. If it's one person, if you're on your own, the music is cued to play, Are You Lonely Tonight? Or if it's a whole group of people, then it will be, a party type song. And that's the lift has just got sensors in it to determine, what music it should be playing. Um, it's an old retail building, so it's just eclectic in nature. But the girls that greet you at the street level are beautifully dressed and cheeky. They all wear red wigs. It is, I suppose, it expresses the Australian culture itself, that it is a little bit laid back, a little bit, because we all came from convicts originally. At one point in time, sort of bit irreverent. We thumb our noses to authority. And so that QT have done it well, and there's obviously one in Singapore now as well. But born in Australia.
My ancestors in Australia were not prisoners of Mother England, not pommies.
Nor were mine.
Yeah,
Or mine.
yeah. Fingers crossed, right? That elevator example is really cool because it reminds me of the classic workaround they had, which was the story goes, people were complaining that the elevators were too slow and they were too slow. So this whole team was put together to say, we want to make a faster elevator. Let's make a faster elevator. And then some guy came around and said, no, 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 just put mirrors in the elevator so people can look at themselves, right? So it's almost the Disney solution to people waiting in line was not to make the lines move faster, but to make the lines entertaining. And that's the same principle, using technology in a creative way.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Certainly in Bangkok, they do a lot of that. I mean, digital signage. I love this example, Brandon, you brought up. I'm going to be talking about that. The next client, the elevators here. There are some hotels that do that sort of stuff too. Lots of mirrors, and they do magic things with those mirrors and digital signage.
Yeah. So cool. And you think that's the elevator experience, which is one little nuance that a lot of the hotels aren't even thinking about. So, Silvio, back to you. Let's shift to technology here and let's talk what is unique about technology to Southeast Asia that other people within and without maybe are not thinking about.
The advantage we have in Southeast Asia is that we don't have legacy. So, The industry in Australia, for example, Brendon, I stand corrected, and maybe the US does have some legacy, um, and they tend to keep doing the things the same way. So my experience has been here that the Asian developer is ready to do something different. So I'd like to say that I'm kind of the godfather of technology here in this region. First to bring automation into a country, or bring automate. I mean, I take Thailand as an example. The term GRMS, guest room management system, is just didn't exist. No one knew what it was. That industry didn't exist, and I kind of kicked that off by educating that market. And some of the first movers in Thailand were local brands. We presented a concept that was international, and they went with it. So what's different about Asia? I think they take the risk. Yeah, everything has to have an ROI, and there is an ROI with the GRMS system. There is an ROI on investing in the right technology. And there is that appetite here to do it right and to be different to that other hotel down the road. So COVID has accelerated the adoption of technology. Now, you do have early adopters, and you have those who just sit on the fence and wait for everybody else to happen. And I think everyone's learned that during COVID, those that were waiting got left behind. Because during COVID, many properties decided, let's do that stuff now. We don't know when we're going to reopen again. We've got some money. We've got something here. And they took the risk to invest and have their properties ready to take the flood of tourists that came. And I think that's good. So, yeah, they're ready to take the risk. They're looking for innovation, and they're looking to do something different and better, and be an icon for for themselves or their family. As you know, a lot of one thing maybe that a little bit different here is a hotel is an icon for the family here. So, you build a hotel and you tend to build it for your legacy family. So generally, you need some money to build a hotel, and in Asia, there's lots of single families who own maybe 5, 6, 7 different properties. But it's a legacy that they will leave for the family that they have. And I think that's a little different.
Yeah, that's an incredible insight. I was just thinking about the whole idea of saving face as a cultural aspect, and if hotels are not just assets, but they're a reflection of your family and of your life, then yes, you have a responsibility to make them as good as possible and to have them reflect your family values and the legacy you want to leave on. And that's a very profound insight, and I wish that translated to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, just take Marriott as a brand, Mr. Marriott. I'm sure when they envisage that, that's what they reflect in their brand. And you're right, Adam. Certainly, I work with a lot of the local brands, and their values are put into the property. How they treat their staff, how they treat their guests is a top priority. But it's also an icon and a beacon for them and their family.
Brandon, how does that differ from down under?
It's probably a little bit similar, Adam. It depends on the hotels. I mean, I referenced the event group, the Ridges Group. They're a local Australian brand. They've always used technology to their benefit. I remember back in the early 90s, they were working on single guest profile back then on AS400s and System 36s at each property. And there are hotel groups that still don't have that now today. But so they put a lot of time in that, and they saw that that was a real point of differentiation for them. I think what we have seen, though, certainly in the Australian market, is as more brands come in, Marriott, a core initially, to be honest, and I think I can say it, that the guys at a core in Australia would say, well, that's fine. What Paris, they can say whatever they want, but we're here in Australia and we'll do what we want. What I have noticed is that there's more compliance coming through. They're probably following brand standards a little bit more, and I think it's probably related to obviously legislation, privacy, cybersecurity is a big one, of course. Everybody's is paranoid about cybersecurity and making sure that you are on compliant hardware for that purpose. Similar to Silvio, we don't have the Asian wealth, but we do have a number of influential people here. There's a plastic surgeon, Jerry Schwartz, a second generation hotelier. He personally owns 17 hotels, or his family does. But his parents started that legacy. And I had the privilege of working with his parents when I was a junior at a PMS vendor. And they bought a hotel in King's Cross, we were talking about before. His dad was a dentist. He ran his dental practice out of, there was a retail level. And they went on to buy, I think, 3 or 4 hotels. And Jerry's expanded on that. And he owns probably one of the most beautiful properties here in Sydney, the Sofitel Darling Harbour, which is just a premium property. So it's a little bit similar. I mean, he's doing that, obviously. There's a pride in taking on that asset, or he actually purchased that from the developer brand new. Yeah.
I mean, to add to that, again, in Southeast Asia, I'll take Bangkok, or actually most of the Asian regions, you know, the local brands have learned from the internationals and probably taken the best of them, and then created their own brand. And this is something also that's a little different here. That again, it's to do with that safe face. But I would say, particularly Bangkok here, that a local brand can match an international brand very easily. But when it comes to technology, standards, security, they all comply. I think the hotels have learned that, particularly again post COVID, that technology is very important. So the adoption of technology is not as fast as we would like, but it is better and better understood today than it was before. And again, when you are building your first empire, you want to do it right. So they go out and get the best. I was with a developer recently who traveled the world and stayed at all different brands. And when I was talking about this and that, he would say, but I didn't see that. I didn't see that. Or I did see that, or this was good, that was bad. So that's the other thing that I think that is a little different about the Southeast Asian landscape.
And I think, Adam, in Australia, a little bit like the US, labor costs are significantly higher than they are in Asia. So we need to use technology wherever we can to streamline operations and, make sure the hotel's as efficient as it possibly can be.
And in Asia, it's kind of similar now because COVID also depleted the workforce. We have a different challenge. We have a language barrier between the guest and the staff. So this is where technology really helps. It helps from streamlining the workflows. Simple things like a guest asking to send towels to the guest room, or just I need my linen refreshed or whatever. That can be a big task. And when you've got a 600-room hotel and and 20% of those guests, even 10% ask that, you need the runners, you need the technology. But most of in the past, the problem was just the language barrier. Because the person on the phone didn't speak English and the person answering the phone didn't speak English. So and this is where technology really has changed a lot, because now you can use a Line app, or you can use WhatsApp, or you can use a hotel app, and you can talk to it or text it in your own language, and the person on the other side can understand your request. So this is a major breakthrough. And then integrating, I was at a conference a couple of days ago. Integrations are there now. Everyone's integrated. That's the great thing. Not necessarily do all the integrations work as they should, but it's a must-have today. That if I pick up the phone and ask or text and I want something sent to my room, that's going to happen. And if it's not happening within a certain period of time, that the duty manager, hopefully doesn't get escalated to the general manager. But if it's necessary, it should. And that today is becoming more the norm than it's a nice to have. So yeah, technology in Asia is also important, and I feel we still have the luxury of having more staff to guests ratio, but we also need the technology to help the staff do their job better. Again, staff really want to take care of their guests, and I've seen them sometimes really frustrated that they can't communicate in the way that they would want to.
This is all incredible advice if you're able to unpack it in terms of just language barriers, saving on labor, everything. And I'm wondering, for any technologists out there, and they're thinking we're either trying to sell into Southeast Asia or Australia, or we're thinking about get trying to make an impact in these territories, what would you advise uh, those companies to pay attention to and to look at, either anything from data compliance to knowing what motivates buyers, showing an ROI? What would you advise?
All right, let me go ahead. For Southeast Asia, first up, you need to be patient. So, if one of the experiences or that I've had is that vendors come into this region and they feel that in 6 months they're going to own the market, and they know nothing about the region. So you need to have patience, and you need to also be ready to localize your brand, localize your people. If you're an international vendor and you want to do business in Asia, you need to understand Asia. There is a different way of selling here than you would have in the US or even Australia. Relationships are always important, doesn't matter where, but there is certainly, a very high building the relationship here. And, I can speak from experiences because I've moved from brand A to brand B and back to brand A, but yet I've kept the same customer sets. So you must build that relationship. And that's, for anyone that wants to come out here, one, you need to have patience, and you need to have kind of semi-long runway, because it does take you some time to be that new player. You need to be ready to localize your solutions and see how it fits in this market. So you need to do some studies, and that relationship building is very important, which means you really need to understand the culture. And I always say I'm still in Asia because I was able to fit into Asia. Maybe we Aussies are better than than other nationalities, but there are all sides of that. But you're either like it and are successful in Asia, or you're not. And I think part of it is that cultural relationship building and being tenacious and being honest.
What about for down under?
I'd echo that as well. You need to localize your product. Obviously, there are certain things in the Australian market. If tax is relatively simple. There are some other real estate type compliances. Um, Having local knowledge is interesting. I mean, I've had people from Europe trying to sell product here, and post demo, the hoteliers said to me, they've never worked in a hotel here. They just don't understand. They were talking about, you know, the person who sits in the housekeeping office waiting for, a guest to ring up for towels. We don't have that luxury. There's no one sitting there in housekeeping ready to answer the phone. So that, they were put off by the fact that that person didn't know the market. So as to Silvio's point, having local representation, somebody you can work with. And personally, I do that for a lot of overseas companies. That's my role. I act as ambassador for those companies. Timing, it does take time. You need to be patient. Relationships are really important. But I think the other thing is you need to be flexible with integrations. You will find local property management systems in the Australian market that you have not come across before that are prevalent here. And the other thing is you need to be flexible when it comes to pilots. You're going to need to create a lighthouse, for want of a better term, with a customer. Because the first thing I find is it doesn't matter if the product is installed in, thousands of sites in the US. An Australian hotelier will say, show me someone locally who's got it and who's achieved an ROI with that product. And it often takes, you have to win someone over. And I suppose to Silvio's point, relationships are really important in the hospitality industry. I've been lucky enough to work with GMs across 4 or 5 hotels. Every time they move hotel and open a hotel, they give me a call and say, Brendon, we're going to need your help with this and with this and with that. And that's all about relationship, because they know at the end of the day that I'm going to look after them and make a recommendation on an excellent product for them.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that whatever, you must be able to deliver and support that product. So if it's, the lighthouse example is very good. In Asia, we're always the first, and I'm probably again this. I always call it the startup guy. Again, I said earlier, the godfather of automation, but I brought in so many new products, and we were the first ones. But you need to do it right, and you need to be there, and you need to deliver what you say. You do that, and it's fine. And we've seen so many companies just, I call them the cowboys because they come in and take, bang, bang, and they're out, and they just don't survive. And so it's very unique, but it's very possible and it's great opportunities. And, you know, Brendon and I are, part of this GAIN organization. And that's why we're here, because we know this market very well and we easily can, not easily, nothing is that easy, but we can certainly facilitate the business because we are the local guys who have felt the pain of doing business in this region.
Yeah, good point, Silvio.
So, in terms of building those relationships and also getting local knowledge to understand the market specifically for technology, I've always found that the key first step is go to a trade show, see what's out there, meet with other vendors, attend seminars, everything. So, for people who are listening, what trade shows would you advise for hotel technology to get a lay of the land?
Brendon.
Oh, thank you, Silvio.
Yeah.
In Australia, there's really only one predominant hospitality show. It's No Vacancy. It's been going for a number of years here. It's a combination of technology and other hospitality products, but it's an excellent show. There is also something that was more of a sort of development show originally, called AHICE, but it's now become probably a secondary education networking event. It's held annually. It was literally just last week in Adelaide. It's probably in its 15th year, and it's now gone into Singapore, Japan, New Zealand as well. So that's a good way to meet people, to work out who's who. Having said that, I've worked with some overseas companies that have sort of gone to those shows and not been able to meet the people they want to. Whereas when I've gone with them, we're able to, because of leveraging the years of tenure in the industry, been able to arrange meetings for them. So that's Australia.
Yeah, and I think in Asia it's even harder. You'd mentioned, Brendon, No Vacancy. So for the first time, No Vacancy now, which has been a very successful hospitality event in Australia, is moving to Bangkok or moving to Asia. So in November and November 18th, No Vacancy, a 2-day event, will be hosted in Bangkok. And GAIN, of course, is the exclusive, not of course, we've become the exclusive networking partner with Terrapin. Now, what's been missing in Asia? First up, there's nothing like a high-tech USA. There's lots of these little things that are going around. So we now have a platform that can bring something like a high-tech to Asia. But on top of that, I think it gives it gives the industry and gives this team that's running this No Vacancy event the ability to bring the best in class thought leaders on stage, to bring, so far the vendors that have signed up for the floor space, they are top tier, and also there are new startups that are going to also sign in as well. But with this, as a team here, teaming up with Terrapin and GAIN and all of our friends in the industry, we've been able to, we're structuring something that's going to be very unique. So it's a plug for that. But this is what's been missing. What also has been happening in the region, if I may add, is all these other events like ITB and HiCap and HC. They're all great. However, I've gone to all of them, and it's always the usual suspects. It's always the usual format. That's what we want to change in the No Vacancy event. That's our goal, and I think we're going to do it. There are some new organizations. I'd like to give the WeHub team in Vietnam, who I think have created a great format and platform that they call Meet the Experts, which is held 2 times a year, one in Ho Chi Minh City and one in Hanoi, and then they have what they call these Hoscar, which is like the Oscars events, which are true networking events with C-level people. We just had one in Bangkok last week. It was awesome. It was at the Dusatani, the brand new Dusatani, and I invited some first timers, and they were just amazed at the level. But it's really, and it's not hard sell networking; it just happens naturally. But how that event is complemented is with a business session prior to that. So by invitation only, because you don't want that session to be full of vendors. But the messaging is all about the market, and this particular messaging event was all about branded residences. So these sorts of things are happening. In Dubai, plug for this guy for my good friend Petwin, but the hospitality network runs a 2-day event. So things are happening in this region, and that's great. And that's how we bring on stage technology, and where we have the opportunity also to give something back, to educate the market on the trends and what people should be looking at, by mixing the speakers with not only subject matter experts, but also true hoteliers that live and breathe the technology every day.
That's a really good summary. So to close out here, you mentioned trends. So let's focus on hotel tech trends that are upcoming. What do you both see that is that one cool thing that can really help hotels to innovate on a technology front for the next, let's say, 18 months to 2 years?
Well, I'll let Brendon talk about the trends, but something that I must say that I think is missing right now from the technology. We talk, there's a lot of talk about sustainability in Asia, and some of it, I hate to say, but a lot of it is just greenwashing, writing down some numbers and removing plastics is a good thing. What I'm seeing is kilowatt hours or electricity just wasted, just air conditioning just flowing out into the open space. We still are not yet, and this is probably because there's no government incentive. This is above the equator. Energy costs are high, but I still see brand new hotels opened, and they've got a key card in there as the energy saver, or I have nothing. So the air conditioning just runs every day, 24 hours a day. And so I would really like to see this change. And I'm really an evangelist here, and I'm really passionate about this particular thing, because I've been knocking on doors for a long time talking about this, and it seems just to be ignored. The chandelier in the lobby gets more attention, and the bathtub gets more attention than putting in a smart thermostat. Right.
Right. I was going to say, if you could, with your knowledge in GRMS, could you offer a solution? Like, is it PIR occupancy sensors, or how would you solve that from a 2025 prop tech and
Great.
System solution?
Great question. So yes, the key card was a 1980 technology, it was a very old technology. We now have what I call occupancy-based logic, using PIR sensors, or using, and you don't need to have these high accurate microwave sensors, but you do need to have a GRMS platform that has the logic ability to do all of the what if, what that. And the occupancy-based logic, having some motion sensors in the room, then detects that there's no one in the room. It then puts the air conditioning into some offset mode, which allows you to save energy. And of course, it has an impact on the chillers, right? When we talk about energy savings, it's more than just what you're doing in the room. But if you manage that energy consumption in the room, then you have a great opportunity. And we've been saying it for a long time, that you can save anywhere from 10% to 30%, and that's possible. And on top of that today, what's really good today is that it's validated. So there are systems out there that that are true energy management and measurement systems. So not only do they manage energy, and not only can they give you a dashboard that tells you all of this, but in real time, you know what the energy saving is per guest stay and how that relates to the CO2 that's being saved. How many trees have you saved by not running the aircon or by reducing the energy consumption? And there's a whole lot of other things that you can do as well. So, yeah, that's the way we're going. And it must work. And it does work if you work with reputable international brands that understand this space. And that's one thing that I really point out, that there's lots of copycats, and those copycats are definitely lower cost, but there's always something that you're not getting when the differential is too much between the others.
Cool. Brendon, what about Australia?
Well, Sylvia and I share the passion with regards to sustainability. It was actually a topic that I did a solo presentation last year at No Vacancy, because similar in the Australian market, we've talked a lot about sustainability, but we're reaching, 2030, where we actually said that we would meet these Paris requirements. So it's getting a little bit more serious here. There is legislation that you must have some form of energy saving. But to Silvio's point, too many properties are still using the key card, which is completely ineffective. Not only is it ineffective, what we're starting to see is more and more properties are moving towards mobile key. When the guest gets to the room, because they've used their mobile device as the key, they've got nothing to put in that slot. So that's creating workload for the staff, because I know of one hotel that, has 30, 40 rooms of corporates per night. They have to go up at sort of 11 o'clock in the morning and put a key card into each of those slots. What they've now pretty much decided to do is don't bother doing that. We'll just leave them in, which negates all of the energy management, full stop. But one of the trends I am starting to see here, Adam, and I think it's probably a global trend, but guests are choosing to communicate more and more now via SMS, WhatsApp, Line, WeChat, depending on where they're from. And hotels up until now have been struggling to channel all of that communication into one point and to provide feedback in a timely manner. So I'm working with the guys at Canary. They have a unified platform. Not only is it unified, but it's using AI to answer about 85% of those guest messages, which is really positive, because we've taken another solution out of a hotel that was unifying it, but then the staff still had to actually go in and reply to each request. And what they thought when they originally put the system in, it was going to improve their guest feedback scores. It actually reduced them, because obviously when a guest sends an SMS, they expect instantaneous feedback. They don't want to wait an hour, 2 hours. So that's certainly something. There's a lot of the technology is around obviously enhancing the guest experience, but also reducing labor costs wherever we can. There's a lot of pressure in the Australian market on margins. We talk about the cost of living. At the end of the day, the cost of business has become higher as well. So whilst average rates have increased post-COVID, energy costs have gone up by 30%. Food costs have gone up substantially, and labor costs have as well. So we're starting to see robots come into play, particularly in housekeeping as well, in a number of properties, just to help from a labor saving point of view.
Yeah. It's so incredible how much you can do with technology, but you're both, brushing over hundreds of hours of work to solve and implement these specific solutions. So, very commendable for being able to summarize it. And even, insider baseball, I was thinking just when I mentioned that for those who don't know, PIR, passive infrared, there's so much insider terminology and alphabet soup of the lexicon of figuring all this out. For now, thank you both so much. This has been a delightful conversation. Truly fantastic advice, both in general for the technology that's upcoming and then for entrances in both of your respective regions. Silvio, thank you. Brendon, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Brendon.
Thanks for listening to the Gain Momentum podcast. To stay up to date, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Gain Advisors, head to gainadvisors.com.